traveler. My apologies, I didn't see you arrive. It's a mighty cold night to be out wandering. Rain ain't let up in 3 days, and that wind's about as bitter as the grave. But I bet you know that just as well as I do. Why don't you hop on down out of the rain before you catch cold? Come warm yourself by the fire. I was just about to throw some bacon on, so you arrived just in time. Come on now, stop looking at me like I'm some coiled snake. I won't bite. I ain't gonna be responsible if you catch tuberculosis standing out there in the rain like that. Letting it soak into your boots certainly ain't healthy. Look, I ain't even armed. There we are. See, ain't it much better under here? Yeah, it ain't a complete shelter from the rain with the roof all caved in the way it is and half the walls missing, but it's better than not. That big old oak tree will keep the rain from drowning us too much, at least. My name's Stanton, by the way. You are? Oh, I get it. You don't tell your name to strangers. What's the matter? Law after you. No, wait, don't tell me anything if they are. I don't want to know. Plus, I can't say it's entirely not understandable. Can't trust folks, no sir. Take that as some advice from old Stanton. So, what brings you this far north on a stormy October night? Just wandering? Well then, you and I are much the same. Can't go home if there ain't no home to go to, ain't that right? This old crumpled homestead ain't much of a home, but it certainly beats freezing to death on the trail. I've rolled that dice one too many times. But I'm from around these parts. I'm a wanderer too, but it certainly doesn't sound like I go as near as far as you. I was born and raised in Coleman, just up the road a few hours. Sure, I could make it there tonight, but I'm in no rush. I travel from town to town in this little county, and I collect things. Mostly stories. Anywhere from tales exchanged in confidence to tell of happenings out west. But my favorite are the ones that boggle the mind, make you uneasy, confused, and maybe even a bit scared. Tales of beasts with red eyes and teeth as big as railroad spikes, to various other nefarious things that go bump in the night. You catch many tales of that nature in your travel? No? Well, it's never too late to start. Our folklore is what separates us from other animals, friend. Our ability to pass on knowledge of what's dangerous and what's safe for centuries in our own demented little ways. My mom, she was an immigrant from Russia. She passed on, unfortunately, many years ago, but she used to tell me tales of the Baba Yaga. You ever heard of it? It's an evil witch who flies through the woods at night in a giant mortar and pestle. She used to tell me that the Baba Yaga would come for disobedient little brats who didn't mind their parents and decided to stay out in the woods after dark. See, she spooked me into being smart. Because goddamn was I terrified of that witch. Now, the Baba Yaga might not have been in those there woods, but mountain lions sure are. And a dumb little idiot boy stumbling blind through the woods seems like pretty easy pickings. What about ghosts? Spirits? You believe in them? It's pretty dumb not to, I should think. Even if the physical manifestations of the long dead may not be real, spirits definitely are. See, even after we die, our thoughts, memories live on, passed down for centuries. Our paws tell us something that their paws told them. Then we tell it to our children, so on and so on. Even long after our names have turned to dust in the mouths of our loved ones, we're still around. I mean, look around you. We sit in an old collapsed homestead. How many memories do you think these broken walls hold? There are spirits here, to be sure. You just have to listen to them hard enough to be able to hear them speak. So how about it then? Shall I tell you a tale? Excellent. I'll recount you one I overheard recently, told by a grizzled-looking Union veteran who spoke of these occurrences like he were pulling glass from a wound. So just sit back, relax, and let the fire chase the cold away. This old man spoke of an old silver mining town called Stillwater. It was small, no more than 8 buildings or so. Still, supposedly, there was a general store and a decent inn. Not a terrible place to stop on a long journey. Or at least that's what it seemed to Captain Carl Taylor Deadfessen of the Union as he rode his men into town. They were tired, parched and dusty from the trail, and sought shelter from the bitter cold night that was quickly approaching. But one thing became immediately apparent to Mr. Carl and his men that sent waves of uneasiness through his little ranks. The town was completely empty. Not a soul to be found. Upon further searching, it seemed as though all establishments had been packed in a hurry and abandoned. All the better, thought Carl to himself. They had themselves a town, and a silver mining one at that. As most men do, Carl began getting that sweet taste of metal in his mouth. Thoughts of grandeur and riches danced in his brain. And as time went on, those thoughts only got stronger, until eventually they completely obfuscated his situation and the strangeness of the empty town. If only there were silver left in that there mine, he'd never have to work again. But he began to get worried. Worried that some of his men may have already had the same thoughts as he. So when the next night rolled around and the town had gone quiet, he called upon his right-hand man. Together the two gathered a few things, an oil lamp and some old mining picks they had found, and set off towards the mine. Now the mine was old, and it sat far in a mountainside at the long end of town, past the inn, the general store, in a very dilapidated old church. They took care not to be seen or followed. The mine was dark and the walls damp, but the path inwards was well worn and obvious. Mr. Carl lit his oil lamp, illuminating the long, lonesome downward decline into the depths of the mountains which hung like a shadow before them. There within was cold and stagnant, and all about the two men silence fell. Carl gripped a bit tighter on his lantern and drew his revolver, and the two men set on their winding path down. The mine went steadily below into the depths, winding in sharp turns this way and that. And the further they went, the more and more they began to see little motes of shine in the gray stone, illuminated by their lights. Silver. Carl could have jumped for joy and whooped and hollered, but he was far too dignified for that, especially now that he had commandeered an entire silver mine. The longer they walked, their footsteps echoed just a little louder. Plans for the revival of Stillwater began dancing in his brain. He got visions of a bustling town center full of people, a lively inn full of silver miners after a long day, and a luxurious town hall with him behind the desk as mayor. He could practically taste it. So consumed by the thought was he that he completely lost track of how long they had been walking. He nearly tripped over a pile of stone in his absence. He stumbled, then stopped, and sat down, gently pulling stones from the pile and beginning to turn them over and over in his hands. They seemed to sparkle and shine in the orange light of his lantern. Consumed by the beauty was he, that he didn't even react right away when his partner let out a yell. It took him a moment to pry himself away from his newfound riches to see what all the fuss was about. He rose to his feet and held his lamp high out in front of him. And there, at the very edge of the light, was a figure, dark and featureless, more like a shadow than anything. And they could only really just see the end of its head as it peeked at them from around a sharp bend, like a scared squirrel peeks at a cat from around the tree. They stood staring for what felt like an eternity, before suddenly, without a sound, the figure darted back behind the corner, disappearing from sight. Now, Carl's friend and right-hand man felt his heart sink with sheer dread as soon as he laid his eyes on that figure. But Carl did not feel the same. His reverence and awe of the silver suddenly turned to rage, as cold as the stone around him. Had one of his men really abandoned his post in order to slight his captain of the riches quite obviously belonged to him? He fired a shot down the tunnel, and after the bastard, he declared. So the two set off running further and further into the mine, rounding corner after corner, trying not to trip over rubble and other debris. Of course now, had the two taken the time to stop and look, they would have noticed the skeleton. But they kept running, and all the time they'd see that shadowy figure just staring at them up ahead, peeking out from the next corner, only to slip away. The two suddenly stopped when they rounded a bend to find a fork in the tunnel. The two argued, Carl saying they should split up and continue the chase, and his right-hand man begging for them to turn around and leave that cursed place. But Carl wasn't having it. He ordered his once friend, as captain, that they should split up and kill whoever it was they found. And so it was. Carl took the left tunnel and began the chase again with weapon raised. Not long after he had began running, but he saw that figure once more, and again and again. But no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't catch the slippery bastard. His anger had finally boiled over. When he rounded the next bend, he slid to a stop. Lo and behold, his eyes fell once more upon the silhouetted head peeking around the next corner. Just at the edge of the light. Without hesitation, Carl aimed and let a shot fly. It echoed down the mine like thunder and struck true. Whoever it was that had been doing the peeking tumbled and bounced on the floor with a hollow thud before disappearing from the light. Carl approached slow with his weapon still drawn, his anger now beginning to die down. But he stopped cold in his tracks, as if suddenly stuck to the stone by some spell. He began to shake, and his breath caught in his lungs as his mouth welled up with a scream of horror. For before him on the ground lay the severed, half-eaten head of his right-hand man, with a bullet hole fresh right between the eyes. That morning, his men found him wandering delirious at the entrance of the mine, still clutching the head of the man. There was a trial. Folks thought the captain went crazy and murdered the poor bastard. And he was found guilty. And they hung the poor crazy captain back in the spring of 1865. But nobody really knows the truth. The captain denied the conviction all the way up till his death. But I do know this. The mine was blocked off by heavy rocks not long after. Now what's the moral of that story, do you think? All good tales have a lesson. What's the matter, friend? Tongue caught in your mouth? You gone white as a sheet? Tale wasn't too scary now, was it? No, that's not it at all. Could it be you've just noticed my uniform? Or perhaps it's the fact that my head now sits on the ground beside me, half eaten, with one bullet hole right between the eyes. I was Captain Carl Detfessen's right-hand man, and I know what's at the bottom of that mine. But I wouldn't want to spoil the story. Now, would I? Go ahead now. Run off screaming into the storm.